Here we go.
Okay. Welcome to the Spring 2024 SLO talk put on by the California Outcome Assessment Coordinator Hub, or how we like to affectionately refer to ourselves as coaches. I'm Amanda Tainter. I am the coaches president, and I'm joined by our founding director, Yarrick Yanio. Moderators are including Alicia Betancourt and Enrique. And Enrique, I'm not even going to try and butcher your last name, but if you guys want to just introduce yourselves briefly.
Good morning, Yarrick Yanio, Santa Ana College School of Continuing Education. I'm the founder of the Coaches Group. Thank you.
Alicia.
Alicia Betancourt. I'm from San Diego City College, and I am going to be one of the moderators today.
Enrique.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Enrique Jauregui. I am the SL coordinator for Fresno City College, located in the Central Valley of California.
And I didn't introduce myself properly. Aside from coaches president, I'm Amanda Tainter. I am a sister college of, not me, I'm from Reedley College, who is a sister college of Fresno City College, where Enrique is. We will all be monitoring the chat, and we will also have a Padlet available if you're more comfortable using that modality for questions, or even just comments that you might want to post. Today's presentation will be posted on the coaches website with all the previous presentations and recordings, as well as all other useful resources. And we'll be putting the link in the chat shortly. Without further ado, Alicia, would you like to introduce our first presenter?
Yes, I'm so excited. Dr. Cyndi Burnett is the Director of Possibilities at Creativity in Education, where she has significantly influenced the integration of creative thinking into educational practices. With a 20-year tenure at the Center for Applied Imagination at SUNY Buffalo State University, Dr. Burnett has been a leader in educational innovation. She spearheaded the development of a massive open online course on everyday creativity, which has attracted over 70,000 participants from around the globe. Her work has encouraged various educational institutions to adopt creative thinking approaches. Additionally, Dr. Burnett is the co-author of Infusing Creative Thinking into Higher Education, a book offering numerous straightforward strategies for college professors to incorporate creative thinking into their teaching. In a time characterized by rapid change and continual innovation, traditional higher education models are being critically evaluated. This presentation addresses the essential role of creativity in teaching and offers college professors a practical framework to integrate creative thinking into their instructional methods. Dr. Burnett will guide educators through effective strategies to enhance their teaching and inspire greater student engagement and innovation in their classrooms. So without further ado, Dr. Burnett.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that? Yes, excellent. So as you mentioned, I taught at the oldest degree granting program in creativity in the world, which is SUNY Buffalo State University, at the Center for Applied Imagination for 20 years. And it was an interesting story because I actually went on sabbatical. I was an associate professor. I went on sabbatical. And what I realized during my sabbatical was if I really wanted to bring creativity into education, I needed to leave the academic world and get into classrooms around the world. So for the last 5 years, I've been working at Creativity in Education as the Director of Possibilities in doing that. Now, our goal for today, we have 2 goals. Number 1, I want you to understand what creativity is and why it is important and essential in higher education. Number 2, I want you to learn how to infuse creative thinking into any content area. And I love a good challenge. So if you feel like I can't infuse creative thinking into your content area, I want you to reach out to me after and we can have a conversation. So the first thing I'd like you to do is we're going to do a little warm up. So I'd like you to just take a moment and write down 5 words that you would use to describe creativity. And if you could throw those 5 words into the chat, that would be fantastic. So 5 words you would use to describe creativity. Open, fun, limitless, hard, Hard. Yes, that's something we don't talk about enough. Innovation, uniqueness, problem solving, clever, new, joy, brainstorming, fun. Yes, creativity is a lot of fun. Risk. Yes. Out of the box. Freshness. Flexible. Give you another 30 seconds. And if you don't have 5 words, you can take 5 words that you read from someone else that relate to you. Imagination, absolutely. Vision, expression. Uniqueness, art, joy, courage, freedom. Oh, yes, I love that word. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create a definition of creativity, but, or I should say, and I don't want you to use your 5 words. So write a definition of creativity without using those 5 words that you came up with. And then when you're done with that, throw it into the chat box for me. Ooh, I love these. I'll learn. Creativity is experiencing newness in thought, action, and emotions. Ability to use information in a unique way and see new ideas. A process of exploring new opportunities. Breaking perception. The ability to pull life expressions from within. Creativity, an idea that draws upon knowledge to explore it in ways not seen before. These are fantastic definitions. A natural, inherent way, yes. Human exploration of freedom. I think you put your own name for creativity, and I love that. I've never had anyone do that before. Acting on your natural curiosity. Yes, I believe that curiosity is the conduit to creativity. Excellent. We'll continue to put those definitions in there and hold on to that definition because we're going to check it at the end to see if it has been changed at all. So if we go to the classic definition of creativity in the field, and I will tell you as a creativity as a discipline, we have many, many different definitions of creativity, but the oldest and the one that we stand by as creativity researchers is that creativity is the generation of novel or new and useful and appropriate ideas. So something new and something useful and appropriate. Now, this might seem like it lacks a little glamour and pizzazz that some of your definitions have, but this is at least a good starting point when we talk with others about creativity is, can you come up with something new and useful, and why is that important? So let's explore that a little bit more. And I just fast forwarded through a lot of my screens. Hold on. So before we go into this exploration of creativity, I want to talk a little bit about the myths of creativity. One, creativity some people think that creativity is something that's mysterious and you can't really understand it or research it. And let me assure you that actually our field has had about 70 years of research, and we have over 20 journals that focus just on creativity. Some people think of creativity that it's belonging to people who are crazy, mad, or chaotic. A lot of educators think of it as chaos, but it's something actually that's a natural part of who we are. Many people who, especially educators that I speak with, think that it's related to the arts. So when they say something like, I'm not really creative, which is something I hear almost every day, I say, okay, let's just take the arts out of it and let's think about the challenges you faced inside of your classroom. So if you think about the last week, and it's Friday, so hopefully you get to just relax a little bit for the next few hours. But if you think about your last week, do you think I've had to solve problems, perhaps with students, with other academics, in committee meetings that you couldn't just Google the answer for? And if you had to create a solution, then that's creativity. And I firmly believe that academics do not make it in the world of academia unless they are creative, because you have to create your own research, you have to create your own lessons, often without having any teacher training. You have to create your own opportunities for service. So there's so many ways that we create as academics. Productive use of creativity. Like I mentioned, it is understandable, natural. It's a healthy part of who we are. In fact, there's so many health benefits to being creative that it works across disciplines. So if you are creative in the sciences and you showcase your creativity, you can apply that in other domains. And I am a firm believer that everyone is born creative and we can nurture that potential. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is how do we nurture your potential and how do we nurture your students' potential? Now, this was a really big epiphany I had when I originally saw this particular model of creativity. And it came out in the Cambridge Handbook of Creativity by Moran. And she talked about creativity as expression and creativity as improving on ideas. Now, I will tell you that my background is actually in the performing arts. And then I went into a Master of Science of Creativity. And what we were talking about in the scientific view of creativity was much different than my experience in the arts of creativity. And when I would talk with people in the artistic domains about creativity, they would say things to me like, oh no, I don't need deliberate creativity. I don't need that scientific stuff. And I'm like, but there's so much benefit. And then I would go to the scientific perspective of creativity with my scientific friends, and they would say, oh no, the arts it's a little too fluffy. It's not concrete. We need something much more disciplined. And I really struggled with that. So I was always trying to find the language that would bridge the expressive side of creativity and the scientific view of improving on things of creativity. And I found the answer, but I'm not going to tell you just yet. I want to show you another model of creativity that I think will help you in thinking about creativity in your domain, in your field. And this is a model that was developed by Harvard researcher, Dr. Teresa Mobley. And she had this componential model of creativity. And she talked about domain skills. So the things that you teach in your classroom, if it's science or history or English, whatever it is that you teach, those are the domain skills that you teach. Domain skills are important. You need domain skills if you want to be creative in your domain. So you need that content. But then she talks about creativity skills, things like risk-taking, curiosity, openness, being able to tolerate ambiguity. Those skills, those creativity skills are also essential, and they are beautiful when they merge together. And finally, she talks about task motivation, and she talks about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. And as you can imagine, she's done a lot of research around intrinsic motivation and being intrinsically motivated to do something. And that shows higher levels of creativity. But just as much, extrinsic creativity and motivation can also be helpful. Now, the magic happens at the intersection of domain skills, creativity skills, and motivation. So how do we build in creativity skills into the content that we teach? So that's something I'm going to be sharing with you in the second half of the session. Before we get there, though, I want to show you this other model from Ron Bagetto and James Kaufman, who are two of the leading researchers in the field of creativity. And this is called the 4 C's model of creativity. Many times when people think of creativity, they think of eminent creators. They think Steve Jobs, they think Salvador Dali, they think Leonardo da Vinci. And that is certainly creative, obviously, but you don't have to be eminently creative. What they talk about is this developmental trajectory of creativity in this model that you see here, the 4 C's model. So on the left, you'll see mini C. And mini C are those micro moments in learning. So you have those micro moments where you learn something new. It's not new to anyone else, but it's new to you. And when it's new to you and you have that experience of, wow, this is really interesting. I never thought about how these combine together. That's mini C creativity. When your students are sitting inside your classroom and you see that little light bulb go off on their faces, you can say, okay, that's mini C creativity. It's a micro moment. I had one of those this past week when I learned I could make flowers out of paper, and I could make a whole plant sculpture out of paper, and I'm trying to do that right now. But I'm learning. I don't know really what I'm doing, but it's fun. So that's mini C creativity. Little C creativity is everyday creativity. That's the stuff that you do every day that shows your creativity. So maybe you enjoy cooking, or maybe you enjoy drawing pictures of portraits. It doesn't really matter. Maybe you like playing the piano, and it's something you practice every day. It's a great hobby. It has great health benefits. Maybe you're expressing yourself in some way. Maybe you're building something, a new tool case for the summer backyard. But that little C creativity might show up every day. It might show up every week, but it showcases your creativity in a unique way to you, but may not be revolutionary to the rest of the world. Next up, you have Pro C creativity, and that's professional creativity. And that's where you are in your field. So that's where the 10,000 hours they talk about. If you have 10,000 hours in your field, then you can have those high levels of professional creativity. So if you ever have done a research paper and had it published, that's professional creativity. And that's where the magic happens in our domains and in our careers, is in that professional creativity. But it doesn't mean that we can't have other aspects that we enjoy doing at the mini C and the little C pathways. So it's interesting. I recently interviewed Howard Gardner, who many of you know of in terms of the multiple intelligences. And he's told us the story that when he was young, he was actually a really good pianist, and he was showing mini C great potential to be a professional pianist. And as he got older, he started playing the piano, but he really didn't want to do it as a career. So he decided to keep it at that little C everyday creativity level. And he didn't go on to do it professionally, even though he could have. So typically in our careers, we only have one or two, maybe 2 domains that we are professional creativity. We have professional creativity. And I will say that James Kaufman and Ron Bagetto have said that eminent creators are not titled that until after they have passed. So no matter what, you're not going to reach that big C, but there's lots of potential to reach Pro C creativity and to help our students reach Pro C creativity as well. So why do your students need creativity? Let's talk a little bit about that. Now, I could show you lots of studies and say, the World Economic Forum said that creative thinking was one of the most important core skills and top rising skills for workers. The next study I just showed, and I could have brought out so many studies. I'm like, how many should I bring out? I'll just bring out 2. So this one was also a recent one that looked at 11.3 million employees from I can't even see it, 800 or so organizations. And they said that there's this rise in creative thinking and analytical thinking. And I bet we all know why, right? Because we're seeing it in our classrooms. It's generative AI and the explosion of technology and generative AI. And so we need our students to think more creatively and to think in ways that machines can't. So that's a few studies. But when I talk with educators and I talk about the future, I talk about creativity in terms of being able to navigate complex problems and to manage the change that's happening in our fields. Because I have a 16-year-old at home, and he's recently been having conversations about where he wants to go to college and what he wants to study. And the challenge is, I don't really know what I'm going to prepare him for in 10 years. Because the landscape of the world is changing, and it's changing so rapidly. Even if you think about how much your classroom has probably changed since the launch of ChatGPT, and how things are rapidly changing, I think what we need to think about is how do we help them think in creative and critical ways, and how do we help them manage the change when it's presented to them? Because the one thing we can guarantee, the only thing, well, taxes, and change. So that things are going to change in our field. So how do we help prepare them with those domain skills that I talked about? So we want our students to understand the domain, but we also want to equip them with creativity skills. So how do we do that? Well, if at this point, and you can give me a thumbs up if you agree with me that creativity is important for your classroom. If you could give me a little thumbs up, I'd love to see where your thumbs are. Excellent. I'm seeing thumbs up. Creativity is important. So, Cyndi, how do I bring it into my classroom? And how do I bring it in when I'm already pressed for time? You have curriculum that you already have to teach. So how do you bring creativity in when you don't want to add it on? You don't have time to add anything on. So what I'm going to show you today is how to infuse creative thinking into your content. And it comes actually from the work of E. Paul Torrance. Now, E. Paul Torrance was known as the father of creativity in education. He died in 2003, but over the course of his lifetime, he wrote over 1,800 journal articles, books, and lots of papers around creativity in education. One of the longitudinal studies he did, which lasted over 60 years, was the Beyonder study. And what he looked at was people who went beyond in their fields. And what he found was, for me, a connector. Now, I hope you remember in the beginning, I talked about expression and improving on and finding that bridge, building that bridge of language that would help people understand what creativity was and how they might bring it into the classroom. And Torrance created a model called the Torrance incubation model. And I actually have another book out on that model, the Torrance incubation model, and I've written a chapter. And if you email me, I'm happy to send you the chapter that I wrote on integrating the Torrance incubation model into higher education. So all you have to do is send me an email at the end of this, and I'm happy to send you that chapter, or a draft of that chapter, I should say. So how do you build this bridge? Well, the Beyonder skills that E. Paul Torrance talked about had 20 different skills about people who went beyond in their field. And when you think about it, creativity isn't just about one skill. It's not just about being original. It's not just about coming up with lots of ideas. It's about being open. It's about risk-taking, curiosity. It's about being cognitively flexible. It's about mindfulness and embracing ambiguity. So I've taken these 20 skills and I've modified them based on contemporary literature. As I mentioned, Torrance died in 2003. So over the last 15 years, I've been working with this creativity skill set, and I've been doing workshops just like this one to educators of, I should say educators who teach students of all ages, and written several books on this, which I'll talk about later. But when you look at this creativity skill set, it provides language to use in any domain. So we want you to look at it in another way. We want you to see things from different perspectives. That makes sense when you're dealing with science. It makes sense when you're dealing with history. It makes sense when you're dealing with anything related to the arts. We're looking at things from different perspectives. When we enjoy and use fantasy, which is all about our imagination, we can use our imagination in any domain that we work in. So I love using this creativity skill set, and I'm happy to send you this handout. It's also on my website. You can download it and use it as much as you want. But the first thing I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and review the list of skills, because there's a lot up there. And I want you to select 3 skills you consider a personal strength and 3 skills that you would like your students to develop. And I'd like you to put those in the chat. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to go through this and pick your top 3 that you think I am really good at embracing ambiguity. Pick your top 3 and pick the 3 that you really want to nurture in your students. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat.
Cindy, you might get to this, so tell me, hold off, I'm going to talk about it, but I'm really curious about measuring creativity.
Measuring creativity. Let's leave that one to the
Students.
end, because
Okay,
that
yeah.
is,
I figured you were going to get there, but
yeah, that is another hour session, to be honest. How do you measure creativity in students? Because there's formal and informal ways that we can measure creativity in our students. I'm going to give you actually an informal way we can do that, but there are ways that we can formally, if we want to evaluate student creativity in the classroom. Yes, please save those questions and I will happily answer them at the end. I think the other question is, how do we measure creative potential? So seeing that potential in our students and helping them to really develop and nurture it is another big piece, especially at the undergraduate level, but even the graduate level. Thank you for sharing. I love reading what people's top skills are and which ones they would like their students to develop. Candace Clymer, I see that you said for students, keep open, and keeping open is the very first thing I teach in all of my classes, is making sure you keep open to new ideas. Yes. And Edward, I agree with you. When we look at the opposite of risk-taking, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we need to give students a space where they can take risks and make failures and not have severe repercussions, like they're going to, lose their scholarship money because they've taken a risk in class. And there are ways to do that. I think if we can give them a safe space to take risks and make mistakes and try again and keep working through that complexity that happens with risk-taking and getting comfortable with failure, we're going to better prepare them for the future, because as practitioners in the world, we fail a lot. I'm sure all of you have had failures. I know my first journal article I submitted, I got totally rejected, and I just didn't even know how to manage that. And it goes back to being aware of emotions as well. Is like, how do you manage the complexities and work through those and look at it another way to reinvent it or to reimagine what it could be and to get over it and to work through that ambiguity. Yeah. Excellent. I'll give you one more minute. Enrique has a question.
I don't know if you can address this, Dr. Burnett. Are you going to address the curriculum standards later, or?
I can certainly talk about standards later.
Okay. It was just about how to, creative learning environment. How do you address that into that
Yes.
environment? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Feel free to keep posting things in the chat. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about is your lesson. So we're going to play for a bit. And what I need you to do is I need you to think about the lesson that you don't enjoy teaching. Now, we all have this lesson. It's the one where you go, oh gosh, I have to teach about, XYZ. What is that XYZ lesson? It's just that it's a one session something on, what is it? Put it in if you could put it in the chat for me, I'm going to write some of them down and I'm going to pick a few that we would all recognize and we're going to work through some of them. That one lesson you find really boring. Okay, thesis. What about the thesis? Media economics. What about the thesis is not enjoyable? Rote grammar. Oh, writing references in certain styles. Let's just call that APA, MLA. Yes, APA references. I think we can all relate to that. Not a number, okay. Licensing standards. Sensitive or controversial topics, okay. Yes, okay, so we can probably all agree to APA, MLA, Chicago. Is Chicago style the same? I'm an APA person. Is Chicago style the same as MLA? Or is that the third? Is there a third one? Yeah. No, okay. History. All different. Okay, so we've got a lot of different writing styles. Yeah, it's painful, isn't it? I had a student who asked me to do extra credit to teach the class about APA, and she wrote a rap song, and it was one of the most brilliant things I've ever had come out of my classes. And it taught all the basics of APA. I think she could have published it. It was a long time ago, probably 12 years ago. Okay, we've got a few things we can work on. This is great. And feel free to add any more if you'd like to add them in. Whoop. So here is mine. The first day of class, when we go in and we have to share our contract and syllabus. Absolute torture. Did not enjoy my first day of teaching. And you're going in and you're trying to build relationships with students and you give them this contract and syllabus, and maybe you just have a syllabus, whichever you have. We had a contract and a syllabus, and we'd hand it to the students. And then you go, okay, do I read this out loud? They can obviously read it. So do I read this to them, right? Not if you've had the situation. Yeah. So you could read it to them, or you could give it to them and they could go home with it and they could read it on their own. But typically they don't read it, right? So they don't read it, or you read it to them, or you sort of talk about it in the class and you read certain parts of it. But it has always been just a terrible way to start the semester. So I was determined to modify this lesson and use a creativity skill. So here's how it works. So you take your lesson, and my lesson is the syllabus and contract. You pick one creativity skill and you merge them together like a delightful peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You have peanut butter, you have jelly, you put them together, you have magic, right? So you have this peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you come up with ideas to help infuse that creativity skill into that lesson. So I'm going to show you actually 3 or 4, I can't remember how many I picked. I think 3 different skills with the same lesson, so you can see the difference. So here's my lesson, first day of class, contract and syllabus. I'm going to use playfulness and humor. So what are all the things I could do on that first day of class to use playfulness and humor inside of that lesson? So I tried this. I brought in a squishy ball. Actually, I think I might have brought in a squishy chicken because it's funnier. And I am very comfortable with playfulness and humor. Not everyone is. So I always say, start with where you're comfortable. But I would bring in a rubber chicken and I would pass it around to students. And whenever a student received the chicken, they had to read a part or a paragraph of the contract and syllabus. Now, it didn't revolutionize the class, but it was fun and it was playful, and we went through all the parts, and it didn't feel like I was just standing up there reading them, the contract and syllabus. And I think the squishy ball or the rubber chicken worked, okay? But let's look at it from your lesson. So let's take the APA. We're teaching students APA, and we want to bring in playfulness and humor. How could we bring in playfulness and humor when we're teaching students APA? And I'd love to hear in the chat box, what are some ways that we're teaching students APA and we can bring in playfulness and humor? Do you have any ideas? False references with funny titles? Sign me up. That's fun. Silly examples, yes. Could you do a kind of treasure hunt with examples, both good and poor? Yes. Make it an escape room model. Figure out the correct style to escape. Jeopardy, yes. Love it. Any others? I feel like right now I want to go out and create an escape room where people have to figure out the APA style in order to escape. APA mystery error spotting. Classroom feud equals family feud. Treasure hunt and escape room. Yeah. I don't think I'd ever escape. Edward, I understand. Just when you think you get it down, they change it. That's the problem. So those are great ways to bring in playfulness and humor into an APA lesson. And so that's as easy as it gets. You just think about what is it that I'm teaching? You pick a skill and you see what you might be able to do to merge those two things together. So let's look at a different skill. I love APA bingo, by the way. Thanks. Let's look at a different skill. Let's look at get glimpses of the future. And let's look at which is all about imagining the future. So it's the first day of class, and I say to students, all right, look, I'm going to give you this contract and syllabus, and I want you to go home and write a letter to yourself at the end of the semester. And I want you to outline all the things that you had to do in order to be successful in my class. And write it out, whatever grade you're hoping to receive, and you're going to give me those letters, and I'm going to save them for you on the last day of class. So imagining what it is that they want to receive in terms of grades, in terms of how well they do on the assignments, in terms of maybe you have them think about the struggles they're going to go through and how they're going to overcome those struggles. So you build in this getting glimpses of their future, and just by the end of the semester. The other thing you could do to get glimpses of the future in that first day is to say, how are you going to use this content when you go into your career? Why does this matter to you? And have them do a little, short essay in terms of putting that into their own context. So that's just a really quick way you could get them to get glimpses of the future on that first day of class when you're going over the contract and syllabus. So let's look at another lesson. Let's look at licensing standards. Who said that? All right. Tell us more about licensing standards, Amanda.
I teach child development, and one of the classes I teach is an infant toddler class. So we have to go over licensing standards for an infant toddler course. It's just, I'm not a rules person by default. So I hate teaching about rules as it is, but these are rules that they have to abide by and know. And it's just the most boring thing ever, but they have to know it. So it's just, what are the ratios, what you can and can't do with breast milk. It's not fun, but mandatory.
Okay, mandatory. So how could we help Amanda teach licensing standards and help her students get glimpses of the future? And in terms of why are they going to need this? So what are some things that her students could do to help the licensing standards, understand those licensing standards, which are essential to understand, right? You don't want them to forget those things, and get glimpses of the future. Role play, fun. Yes. What are some things Amanda could do to help her students understand those licensing standards and get glimpses of the future? Real life scenarios, yes. Watch through observation. Observe infant classrooms, for example. I was even thinking, imagine if you walk in and, you have them write out imagine if questions or stories, and then you share them in the classroom and they have to try to respond based on the rules. Case studies, yes. Have students develop scenarios where a certain licensing requirement was not met, leading to chaos. Yes. Compare and contrast types of rules interpretations. Who is right and who is wrong? Excellent. Those are some solid ideas. Okay, this is the third one. So this one is about curiosity, and curiosity is all about reinforcing the internal urge to learn, and it's about asking questions. So after the first two I tried, they were okay. They worked, but I was really after something that was going to be knock it out of the park for the first day of class. So here's what I did. To build in curiosity, I gave each student 20 Post-its and a Sharpie marker. And I said, your homework for the first day of class is to go home and write 20 questions that you have about me, my content, or my syllabus and contract. Anything you want. One question per Post-it. 20 questions. So they had to generate all these questions about my content, about, when I say me as a professor. So what do you like to be called? What is your research focus? Anything like that, as well as anything about the contract and syllabus. So that was the first day of class. On the second day of class, they came in. Now, I had some students who walked in and they were like, there was an assignment. I don't remember an assignment. I'm like, I gave you Post-its and a marker. Do you remember? Oh, right. Yeah. I'm like, okay. All right. Observe, observe, observe. I could see right away the students who might not make it through the semester. Okay. So they automatically went on my sheet as keep these students under your radar because they might fall through the cracks. Okay. I had a second group of students. Those students were like copying from other students. So they came in, they're like, can I see your questions? I got to write up my questions. So they remembered, but they were copying. So I'm like, stop. The point was not to copy. I wanted you to read the contract and syllabus. So you need to go back and you need to do it again. I didn't give them credit for having participation that day, but some of them just, were copying it. I cut that off, right? And I made them do it again. Then I had a third group who they might have come up with like 5 to 10 questions out of 20. They were supposed to come up with 20. And so I went to them and said, okay, the goal was to come up with 20 questions. And they said, I could only come up with 5 to 10. And I'm like, okay, that's great as a starter point, but I asked you to push yourself to 20. So I could see where those students would land at the end of the semester. They would land probably in the BC range of my class. So how could I help them right from the start, really push those boundaries and get to the 20 that I asked for, get to that excellence level that I really wanted? Then I had a few students, I think I had 2 in this particular class, and I looked at their questions and I almost cried because the questions had so much depth. And this was actually one of my students who came up with all these questions. You can see there, would you say people who didn't go for their dreams are not creative? Can you master creativity? Does a person just having ideas makes them creative? And this student And it looks like, yeah, this student had all of his Post-its laid out, and I looked at them and I said, you did this? And he said, yeah, I had so many questions. And I was like, I'd like to see you after class. And he said, you want to see me after class? And I said, yeah. And so I sat down and I talked with him. I said, I'd like you to consider going into our minor program and study with us in creativity, because I think you have real potential for this field. And I think you could do a lot for the field of creativity and whatever it is you're interested in, which was business. And so he did come into our minor program. And he finished the minor, and I saw him years later, and he said, it was that creativity class. It was that one assignment. He's like, it really launched me into being able to really bring creativity into business. And so it was a marker of understanding who had the creative potential in my class from day 2. And it was an absolute game changer. And I did it. And these were undergraduate students that I did this with. And it was an absolute game changer, and really understanding where all the students were coming from and where I needed to get them in order to be successful in my class. So that was just building curiosity into that first day. All right, so let's look at your lessons and curiosity. So how could we build in asking questions and getting curious in sensitive or controversial topics? How can we build in curiosity? Into sensitive, you're teaching a sensitive or controversial topic. How can you build in curiosity? Feel free to write in the chat box for that. Ask students about their vision, ideas about how to tackle difficult topics. Yep. Create a story about a scenario. Okay. Set ground rules. Argue for the opposite side of the issue. That's something I do a lot in Look at It Another Way. Is I would give students, have students argue an issue and then say, okay, swap. And now you have to argue the opposite issue. That is a great way to do it. Love it. Ask students to identify aspects of the topic that may be controversial or difficult. Yes. Yes, setting ground rules is essential when you're dealing with sensitive topics like that. And I think even asking students to generate questions confidentially to submit to the teacher, and then as a teacher, you look at what are the real things that you're scared of. Creating that safe space, which comes out a lot in the creativity world, creating that safe space for people to explore and ask questions without feeling like people are going to judge them. Challenge them to explain the meaning of what they're doing, especially what their stake is. These are fantastic ideas. All right, just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to, I want to give you a couple quick other examples of how faculty members have used integrate the infusing method, which again comes from the Torrance incubation model. At the top, this was a teacher, a professor who was teaching a stats and assessment course, and he had this really dense article. So he chopped up the article into small pieces, and he gave them to students in groups to read a specific section of the article and then create it as a Lego. And then they had to explain it as their Lego design. And so they went through the article based on the sections that students had selected, and they talked through the article based on Lego, which was great fun. Whoop. The other example, this is factor analysis, which one of the faculty I coach said, I can't teach factor analysis in a creative way. And so this was actually Make It Swing, Make It Ring, which is all about bringing music and movement into the classroom. So he brought in music, and then he had them moving this around based on the factor analysis and teaching the factor analysis. So he had them actually moving around the classroom with music to understand what factor analysis was. The last example I'm going to show you is from a course I taught on it was historical perspectives of creativity. And it was this PowerPoint presentation that was the most boring thing I was ever gifted in education. So someone handed this PowerPoint slide deck and it was like all black and white pictures. It was very dull. And I would just go through and say, okay, here's Alex Osborne. He was the inventor of brainstorming, blah, blah, blah. It was so boring. So I took the skill, visualize it richly and colorfully. And I said, how can I get my students to visualize things richly and colorfully? So I gave them paper and I had them create a poster on one of the scholars, classic scholars. And then we started building this wall of classic scholars in the field. And that's what the classroom looked like at the end of the week. So it was fun, it was engaging, it was so much better than that boring PowerPoint. And it really got students thinking about it. And I have students to this day, and this particular class is probably 10 years ago, but students who took this class when I made that adjustment, and it is still the most memorable class that students remember from our entire curriculum because they remember this visualization of it and all the scholars that they had to reenact. So this is the book that's coming out. It's Infusing Creative Thinking into Higher Education. There are 700 ideas in this book on how to bring creative thinking into higher education based on those 20 skills I showed you. We have 33 contributors who are college professors from around the world that have added their stories in. It is about to come out. I was hoping it was going to be out by now, but it's not. And I'm okay with that. We all, everything takes so much longer. It was actually supposed to be out in January. But it will be out in May 1st. I actually have the final draft ready to go now. So May 1st, it will be out. And if you want to connect with me, which I'll show you in a moment, you will see all the updates that's coming out if you want to pick up a copy. And I also host the Fueling Creativity and Education podcast. On this podcast, we have the leading scholars, educators, professors, practitioners in the world. I think we've had 13 countries represented on our podcast that we interview to bridge the gap between creativity research in the classroom and creativity practice. And if you're interested in this field of creativity and education at all, I think you'll love this podcast. We have had some tremendous interviews. We're now going into our 9th season. So we've done 84 interviews. We've also got a book coming out on that and what we've learned, which is probably more than I learned 20 years teaching with all these rich conversations. So I hope if you like podcasts, you'll subscribe. We're on every platform you can imagine. And if you'd like to connect with me, that's my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to connect. Say you're at my session today. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to send you my slides, the weaving, the skill chart, anything you're interested in, that article I mentioned on the whole Torrance incubation model. And if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the meeting chat. I know we have about 7 minutes till the next presenter. And but if anything wasn't answered today, I'm happy to hop on a call with you. And this is something obviously I'm very passionate about and so happy to talk more about it. So thank you. Yes. Is it possible to get a copy of your chart? Yes. I looked on your website. So if you go into my website, creativityeducation.com, and you go into, it says, I want to bring creativity into higher education. And then you go into Infuse, you'll find the sheet there. But I'm very happy to send it to you if you just want to email me. And there's my email address, Cyndi, like Cyndi Lauper at creativityeducation.com.
I think I'm going to ask a question that came from our Padlet, because I think we covered a lot of the questions that we already had created. But how can we engage students that are more disinterested or kind of struggle with some of these methods?
That is a fantastic question. So I always made participation part of my class. And I would say to participate, you need to not just sit there and look at me, but also, I did a lot, especially the undergrad level group activities. And I would say on the first day, this is what this class is going to be like. And if you're not comfortable with that, I suggest finding someone else. But a lot of people stayed. And I would never force anyone to do that's the one thing you do not ever want to do is make someone do it, even for participation points. Just say, you know what, I see you're not interested in this. Would you be more comfortable sitting out? The other really important thing to note is you have to be comfortable with what you're doing. I used to be a professional actor, so I'm very comfortable. I mean, in that class I showed you with the posters on the wall, we were on the desks. We did some fun and wild things in that class, but I was with graduate students who were all studying creativity. You're not going to do that with a group of, math students at the undergraduate level. So you want to find ways to start small with maybe, talk with a partner. The other thing that I would mention that really helps is I don't allow students to sit in the same spot every class. And the reason why I do that is I say on the first day, you can't, and I say this in my syllabus and contract, don't sit in the same spot. The first day, what happens, students come in, they sit in the same spot. Then every class they come in after that, they feel like that's suddenly their spot for the rest of the semester. But I tell them, I'm going to be putting you into groups. I'm going to be putting you into pairs. I want you to get to know everyone in the class. And whoever knows everyone's name in the class first gets bonus points. That always gets students talking. But if students aren't comfortable, I say, it's okay. If you're not comfortable with this, you can just observe. Oftentimes when they're observing, then they want to participate because they feel sort of left out when everyone else is engaged. I've also just given it time because some students, it's like, oh, I don't really feel comfortable with this. It's like, okay, why don't you watch? What are you observing when you watch the others who are participating? And really getting them to look at it from a different lens. And that way they don't feel like vulnerable or exposed in any way, which, I mean, it's not real. It's just that some students just want to sit there and be quiet and sort of be, I don't want to say invisible, but they want to be there. They want to learn, but they're not really comfortable with that interaction with people, especially that they don't know. And I totally respect that, those introverts. And you can say that up front. Introverted students are able to learn in such a dynamic and changing environment. It can be a lot. And one of the things that I always build into my classes is time to reflect. So before we go into like this big, like even with the curiosity, I didn't ask them, okay, here are Post-its. You're going to generate questions out loud. I would have never done that on the first day. It's like, go home, think about it, reflect on it. So you're coming up with these questions and it's not in a threatening way. It's just you're thinking on your own. We're trying to get them to think in different ways. That classroom that I showed you with all the posters, those were students that, like I said, were in our graduate program and in creativity. So I knew they were willing to take risks with me. And I built in those risks slowly and allowed them to step back if they felt uncomfortable in any way. Because I always say that up front. If at any point you feel uncomfortable in the project-based learning, you can just observe it and see what you've learned. But for the most part, even the introverts enjoy working. And if sometimes students are like, I want to work by myself, I'm like, go ahead, you can work by yourself, no problem. If you would prefer to work on your own on this, that's fine.
Okay. And then do you kind of maybe start some conversations with that student while they're working on their own, just so they have some interaction and don't feel completely isolated?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's what we do, right? Just checking in on them to make sure, do you understand? Do you have any questions? Would you like me to start with you and you can go on your own? But I think choice, and this has come out a lot actually in the podcast, not something I had thought about prior, but choice and voice to really think through, how they want to do something, how they want to learn something is going to be different, and sometimes you try these things in one class and it works beautifully and sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it flops. And I think that's something that you have to get comfortable with. And I think another really, if I could give you one more tip, I've got 1 minute to give you one more tip. The most important thing that you can do is share your failures with your students. So it could be anything, like I'm learning something new and I'm learning how to play the guitar and it's taking me weeks, or, I submitted a journal article and I got rejected. Showing them as professors, they think we're these, mega beings with PhDs. And the reality is, like, we struggle with complexity and ambiguity just like they do. And they have to see that we pick ourselves up as well. So modeling the way for our students with these behaviors of curiosity, openness, risk-taking, and embracing challenges is going to help you just build a creative environment for your students.
Thank you. And there was one more question that I thought was really important, and I know we're just about out of time, but just how hard is it to integrate this into online courses?
Oh, I am happy to have a conversation about that, but it's not as hard as you would think. So I'll give you a really quick example. Embracing ambiguity, which is one of my favorite creativity skills because people struggle with it the most, including myself. I had a embrace ambiguity, tolerance of ambiguity assignment each week for my distance students. And so it was a 20-minute assignment. It was a current issues course I was teaching. And I said, you're going to open up this folder and you're not going to know what's in that folder until the week opens for that folder. And I'm just going to tell you it's going to take you 20 minutes to do, but you're not going to know what the assignment is. And it would drive them crazy. And I would do really fun things inside of those folders to make it more engaging. Like I had a voice that I picked up on Fiverr it was the voice of Morgan Freeman saying like, hello, Cindy's class of current issues, you know, and they were all like messaging me and they're like, I can't believe it. You had Morgan Freeman, you know, sharing our tolerance of ambiguity assignment this week. You know, those little surprises that you can give students that make it so much more fun. Can really enhance student learning. So you can absolutely do this virtually. In the book, we have also how to use generative AI in enhancing these skills inside the classroom. So thank you so much.
Such a wonderful presentation. I know all of us are leaving with really great ideas and I can't wait for the book.
Thank you.